The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. When it was completed in 1972, the Cross Bronx Expressway was hailed as an engineering marvel, the first highway ever built through a dense urban environment. It was expensive for the time, costing $40 million, and was seen as a breakthrough linkage between Route 95 and the George Washington Bridge. But now, 40 years later, we know a lot better. The Cross Bronx Expressway is a disaster in every way. With traffic backups that span its length morning, noon, and night, it is a literal killer of Bronx lungs, spewing deadly exhaust into Bronx neighborhoods 24/7, 365 for every inch of its 6.5 miles. In fact, today's daily news, right here, front page of the paper, two plunge 75 feet off of the, they didn't say it, but I'm saying the very poorly engineered Cross Bronx Expressway. So other than cursing in frustration as we sit for hours in traffic, what, if anything, can be done about it? Tonight's guests are starting the ball rolling, putting together a Cross Bronx Expressway initiative that hopes to come up with some relief to the Bronx, which has been hurt so badly and, in fact, split in two by the Cross Bronx Expressway. To join me in welcoming the founder of the initiative and a member of Community Board Number 9, William Rivera. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. And also the initiative's co-founder and community leader. Welcome back to BronxTalk, Louis Sepulveda. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary.
Mr. Rivera, I recited a litany of problems with the Cross Bronx that there's no doubt in my mind every one of the 1.3 million Bronxites knows by heart. Tell me what it is that you want to do and you hope to ultimately accomplish with this initiative.
This initiative, about a month ago, I started doing some homework on the Cross Bronx, and unfortunately, not a lot of people have been doing the work and the outcry on the Cross Bronx Expressway. I got together with my co-founder, Louis, and he's actually going to start off on a little history of the Cross Bronx, and Robert Moses, the silent killer, I like to call it. But and we'll get to how I came about starting this initiative.
And so the problems that you identified were some of the same things that I talked about, right?
Oh, of course.
And for you personally, you live in that area, you work in that area, do you try and, nobody traverses the Cross Bronx on a regular basis because you'd still be sitting there.
It's funny you say that. I live 3 blocks away from the Cross Bronx Expressway. Mm-hmm. My community board, the Cross Bronx, runs through the heart of my community board. Mm-hmm. So this is an issue I know very well since I was walking to school.
What are the problems that you see from a personal basis every single day?
Traffic. Parking lot of tractor trailers, commercial traffic mostly.
Mm-hmm. And how does it affect what you do, what your neighbors do, and your life every day?
Quality of life, the economy, children, playgrounds near the Cross Bronx Expressway, asthma, big topic.
You're concerned about them literally playing, not in traffic, but right next to traffic.
Of course. Asthma has been linked to traffic pollution. New York Times says, and a lot of studies have said, traffic mixed with pollution is a bad thing for the Bronx. It's probably the Bronx's worst enemy, and nobody realizes it.
And it's running right through. Mr. Sepulveda, I think like many Bronxites, my reaction over the years has been, well, we all heard there's not much that can be done about it. Right. That this thing is going through our borough. We know that there's no shoulders on it. It's too narrow. And it is a vital thoroughfare, yet nobody's moving very quickly. How did we get to the point that we have the Cross Bronx and that it just literally cut the borough in two and caused so much devastation?
Well, Gary, your introductory statement can be sort of like the mission statement for what we're trying to accomplish here.
No, I need to be paid royalties. No.
But you see, the problem is that when the Cross Bronx was built, you had about 60,000 vehicles that would cross that highway per day. That number has increased to over 180,000 vehicles per day. The amount of...
Let me just interject for a second.
Sure.
There is a graph up there, so if we can get that graph while he's talking that talks about the number of cars.
Right.
That's very instructive. There it is. Go ahead.
Right, so the amount of pollutants that are attributed to stalled vehicles, most of the vehicles that pass there use the trucks that use diesel fuel. And diesel fuels create pollutants and carcinogens that are sent into the environment. And these things lead to things like premature deaths with children, asthma, cancer, and it also creates a major problem for the commercial area that aligns that. We in community board...
And in what way? I mean, if the traffic is just going through it, why would that affect a store or a business that's maybe lined up like by Hugh Grant Circle or any of the other places?
Well, I'll give you an example. Sure. When the trucks exit the Westchester exit on the Cross Bronx Expressway, many times to avoid the traffic, they go into that exit and they try to get around Westchester Avenue. And these trucks are traversed in a way that they prevent traffic from passing there. And so people that have businesses there are losing commercial vehicles, are losing vehicular traffic. People that can go and purchase, and people stay away from that area because they don't like the traffic. I have a satellite law office right on Hugh Grant Circle, and I can tell you that I've lost many clients because they refuse to go into that area, drive into that area because they can't find parking. They despise the amount of traffic. So if you have a business and you can go business in that area, and you can go somewhere else to go purchase the same item, you're going to go somewhere just to avoid that traffic. It's a mess. We can't open our windows in the office because we can literally taste the pollution, the pollutants that are in the air. We can taste it from our law office. It's a terrible situation that has to be resolved, and something has to be done. We ignore, a lot of times the federal government, the state government ignore the Bronx. And after we're completed with what we do with this initiative, if they ignore us, there's going to be a major, major problem in the Bronx. Because we intend to, even if we have to stop traffic, if we have to stop traffic on the Cross Bronx, if we have to do protests and rally to bring attention to this silent killer, we're going to do it.
William, the problems are obvious. I talked about it. You both have talked about it. What do you expect to do? Now, there was also, and Jane, we could put that up there too and show people about the study that the state did, I guess about 7 years ago. It completed in 2004, a study of the Cross Bronx Expressway. What did you think of that study, and why was that not sufficient, or are you doing the next step? Just put that in context of where we're at right now.
The major investment study you saw on the screen is a study that the New York State Department of Transportation did on the overall major arteries in the Bronx. And there was a little project they did on the Cross Bronx Expressway called the Bronx Connector Program. So basically connecting the local streets and creating new streets, so you have a local major service road, if you want to say, that's aligned with the Cross Bronx. So if the Bronx residents who want to do short trips, they don't have to go on the Cross Bronx Expressway. They could, if they want to go to one side of the Bronx to another, they could use this connector road together with bicycle routes and transit, such as bus roads. To answer your question, that doesn't solve the problem of the commercial traffic on the expressway.
So let's just analyze that for a second. What they did, and I went through it, what they did was talked about many transportation alternatives to get people out of their cars and put them in other ways, whether it be through ferry services, whether it be through bicycles, whether expand the various Metro North options or the subway options, bus options as well. So that would be a good thing, and certainly get some of the people out of their cars, potentially, providing mass transit alternatives, environmentally sound. But you're saying that's not sufficient.
No, the Cross Bronx Expressway is the worst congested corridor in the United States of America, averaging about 180,000 cars a day.
Right. And we saw that on that graph, that it was literally 3 times what it had been built for.
It's not built for that. And also the average is about 115 hours of congestion a week, 115 hours of congestion a week, and it's ranked the Bronx River Avenue, the Cross Bronx Expressway, which is in my community board, is the #1 traffic congested intersection in the United States. 4 of the top 10 are on along the Cross Bronx Expressway. 4 of the top 10 most congested intersections are on the 11-mile span of the Cross Bronx Expressway.
Louis, you talked about civil disobedience or any kind of action. Listen, we're a little bit a ways from that right now. What would you like to see happen, either as an extension of that study that was done in 2004 or something new? What would you like to see happen that would make you say, good, we now have progress and we're doing something about the cross?
Well, in other states, they took certain measures to alleviate the amount of congestion in their highways. What you have to do is you have to create an alternative for the commercial traffic so that they can either go, they build tunnels in some of these interstate highways so that the major traffic, the trucks can go underneath the tunnels, and that will decrease the amount of pollution. Or to create exits where only the residential or non-commercial traffic can go out, and creating a system where commercial traffic will bypass these exits and go directly either to the George Washington Bridge, because the objective is to decrease the amount of stalled vehicles and the amount of commercial traffic, because diesel creates the major problem. You see, they have a study here that there's major components that diesel releases into the environment. You're talking about carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide.
I don't think anybody could possibly dispute the harm that it does.
Right.
Jane, there's also a comparison picture of the Cross Bronx and a highway in Seattle.
Yes,
I think that's
correct.
pretty instructive. So if we can get that up on the screen, this is the kind of thing that you're presenting. On the left, which I think is a fascinating photo, when I saw it, I'd really never seen the Cross Bronx like it.
Yeah.
That is literally the way the borough was dissected by the Cross Bronx Expressway, and you could see it just, was cut right through all of our neighborhoods, and of course the overpasses. Now, what is that on the right side, and why is that potentially the type of alternative you'd like to see?
Well, you can see how the traffic, some of the traffic has been deviated underneath to decrease the amount of congestion in, this is the Alaskan Way Viaduct. So you see there's less traffic as opposed to what you have from the Cross Bronx. Something like that is a viable option here. Now, of course, construction in New York City is extremely expensive. But when you consider the health dynamics, the health impact that this continued pollution has in our borough, then we're going to have it's going to be more expensive in terms of health costs for the community. So we have to start now. This is our solutions are going to take place 15, 20 years from now ultimately. But we have to start now, because if not, our children are going to suffer the impact of this traffic.
And I could just interject, if you're looking at saving money, the transportation costs of any truck that's trying to go from, let's say, Connecticut across the George Washington Bridge, it's costing them time and fuel and everything else.
Oh, absolutely.
So that cost is a lot. Now, the costs that were quoted in the study that was done by the DOT ranged from the different types of projects from $100 million to $1 billion in 2002. Do you have in your mind, either one of you, William or Louis, the kind of investment is going to be necessary? If you're talking about building an overpass or another highway through the Bronx in the city of New York, I can't even, the hundreds of billions of dollars, the tens of billions of dollars. How much money would it cost? And of course, then all of us who are having a very hard time, whether it be with public funds or private funds, are going to say, who really is going to pay for this?
Well, that's funny you say that. When a quality of life issue, 30% complain that it's traffic congestion in their community. That 30%, 70% don't want to see an increase in taxes.
What study was that?
That was a study in California, Department of Transportation. I believe that study, nobody wants to pay more for anything nowadays. But the issue you brought up, this initiative, the Cross Bronx Express Initiative, is going to be a comprehensive study analysis on the Cross Bronx Expressway. I started a month ago and it got off the ground pretty rapidly. It's premature. It's involved elected officials, private and public governmental agencies, college institutes, college universities. We have Columbia University on board, NYU Polytech. It's going to be bringing the best people to the round table to find out the best solutions. Some of the answers I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I plan to get the experts to find that out.
Mr. Sepulveda, you've been involved in legislative offices and certainly in various types of political activity.
Yeah.
How do you see this playing out? Is this the kind of thing, let's say, that the borough president would undertake and say, now we're going to have a task force? Do you see this working through one person's elected office? How do you see the kind of collaboration that Mr. Rivera is suggesting taking place? What's the process?
Well, no, you're going to have several political leaderships, be it state, city, and federal, to get involved. Your congressperson has to be involved. Your state elected officials have to be involved. it's such a big problem, and it crosses several electoral districts, that unless all of them are involved, you're not going to have the force and the strength and the solutions that you need. Now, we've met with several elected officials. Every time we go and we explain to them what the issue is, we give them the numbers. They all enthusiastic.
I was about to say they could probably give you, just like I can, and I'm just an amateur in this. They could any one of us could tell you the problems with the Cross Bronx.
Right, but they don't specifically. They don't have, for example, the types of contaminants that go into the air, the number of congestion hours, the expense that it costs, which is $1.1 billion it's costing this country on traffic alone. And they don't know about other solutions, for example, in Chicago, in California. You have to start somewhere. And when they see a topic like this that helps the entire community, who's going to stay behind? What elected official is not going to want to get behind us?
I think what you say makes total sense. We're going to go to the telephones. It's Jeff from Morrisania is with us. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
How you doing?
We're doing great. Welcome to the show.
Okay. Well, basically what I'm trying to ask the question, have they looked into the fact that we have no weigh stations? And because we have no weigh
for the
stations,
trucks.
what's happening is the trucks are overloaded. So whenever we do the construction on the Cross Bronx, they come in overloaded and mess up the roads. Right. So we have to fight to get a weigh station either at the other side of the George Washington Bridge or right before you get into Connecticut.
Very, very good point. Jeff, thank you, and I'm going to give you a snarky answer. Well, we'll just pull off on one of the shoulders and we'll create a weigh station on the Cross Bronx, which, of course, we don't have.
But that's certainly, the
and his question is brilliant.
No, absolutely, and part of the initiative, that may be one of the solutions, one of the recommendations that the initiative will come up with. So we're open to all suggestions. If that's going to help, certainly it's a great idea.
So you do a weigh station, let's say on the Jersey side or somewhere in Connecticut before they get to the area.
Yes.
But what is remarkable, I think, about his question is nobody ever considered, gee whiz, maybe we ought not to have these super heavy trucks traversing through the Bronx. Nobody has ever said, you know what, this is costing something. And they've said, sure, what the heck. I mean, great question, Jeff.
Excellent
Thank you very much. And I'm sure you just opened their eyes.
Absolutely.
Robert from the South Bronx. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Hi, Gary. How are you?
I knew I'd get you to call. Robert and I had a little thing on Facebook, and I made him call me this week. What's up?
I got two quick questions and a quick comment. Connecticut and Jersey both have weigh stations. But can we stop the trucks from coming in at all and have them come through like the Tappan Zee? Because they just destroy, even when they get off on the service road and they try to go underneath the train station, they create more havoc. So that's my first question. And the other question is, can we make the Cross Bronx like the Brooklyn Boulevard, where we can make an overpass and we can leave the highway as the underpass? Is that possible?
Okay, so we got two questions. Robert, I believe this is the kind of dialogue that these two gentlemen want to have 24/7. Thank you very much. So the first question is there a way, now this is a major interstate, can you select the type of traffic or stop certain types of trucks from coming through?
NYU Polytech University, one of their classes are doing a traffic study, and these are some of the issues. Very good question. A few years ago, Mayor Bloomberg had the traffic pricing, congestion pricing. One of the things was to tax the commercial vehicles on the Cross Bronx so they could go north and west to cross the river at the Tappan Zee Bridge. That's a great idea. Fortunately, the communities in Westchester probably won't be too happy that some of the trucks are going that way. But it's a very good idea with the congestion pricing to bring those trucks up.
But you have to have the political muscle, the wherewithal to get it through. The problem is that once you talk about a toll, for example, or congested pricing, then the elected officials are against it.
Well, I'm going to just add something that's a little out of the Bronx news, but the fact is there's a serious discussion about a new Tappan Zee bridge. Yes. Seems to me, because the Tappan Zee is backed up now, certainly during rush hours, as badly as any highway around, maybe even as badly as the Cross Bronx. So it seems to me that's going to have to be a coordinated discussion, that if you're going to do a new Tappan Zee, maybe you present it as an alternative to the Cross Bronx Expressway. What about the second part of his question, adding additional roadways? I guess those kinds of engineering considerations are what you're really looking at.
Oh yeah, but we also have to look. We have to make a cost analysis of how much it's going to cost to create that. When you're talking about these kinds of public works, most of the money has to come from the federal government. And so, if we have viable options, we have to tap into the federal government. That's where your local, your senator or your congressperson can come in and start working on that. The state doesn't have the coffers that the federal government has. But without federal intervention, it's almost impossible to do it. In this economic climate, perhaps not. But we're talking, this is something that's going to happen 10, 15 years down the line, but we have to start it now.
I'm going to list a couple of items that were presented in that 2004 study, and I want to go back to the process question because you talked about senators, and after I list them, I want you to tell me who you think sits at the head of this committee, whether it be the president, Charles Schumer, the Federal Highway Safety Bureau. Obviously, there's a major capital investment, probably of all levels of government, that's going to have to be involved. Mm-hmm. You're going to need to coordinate all the responsible agencies. There's no question about that. There will be significant environmental impact studies. You're going to have to deal with the fact that while something's being constructed, what are you going to do with all that traffic and the residual process that will cause? Sure. There could be, let's say, emergency situations, and if you're building or reconstructing, you're getting in the way of that. So with all those potential considerations, who's at the head of this? Does this become a Charles Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand issue? Do they engage in agency? Are we looking for a task force? How are we going to get all of this together to make it happen? What do you see?
That's a good question. The community is going to be ahead of this agency.
You vote for the Bronx, huh?
They
right.
For the last 20 years, the Bronx has dropped the ball on this. It's my personal opinion. This is something that is very important. Are we going to wait till it's 300,000 cars a day? We have the worst corridor in the United States of America. The Bronx should be proud of that, and they're fixing it in other places of the country, and they don't have the #1 worst corridor in the country. So we're going to put the fire to the feet of the elected officials who have to go out there, and hopefully we get the money. The mission, at the end of the day, all those agencies will be involved with colleges.
And you like the idea of colleges because they can provide some of the engineering expertise and kind of out-of-the-box thinking that this might require.
Correct. There's a PhD student at Columbia University who wants this to be his thesis. He wants to work on this project the next 2 years. He came from China, Beijing. He built tunnels in the subway systems over there. This is going to attract a lot of expertise and a lot of students who are capable on this type of project. At the end of the day, most of the funding, at least 90%, is going to have to come from the federal government. The mission of this initiative is to have a ready-to-go project. We don't have a ready-to-go project in the Cross Bronx Expressway.
We don't even have a ready-to-go thought, frankly, other than what you... I'm being blunt, but nobody, including myself, who has driven the thing, I can't even think of, unfortunately, how many times, we've always just accepted it.
And if you talk to the New York State Department of Transportation, they're on board and helping us. The gentleman who was in charge of the New York State Region 11 that was involved in the arterial study in 2004 is retired, but he is on board now helping us. What a lot of state officials say that it has to start at the community. They're really happy that the community is getting involved to scream for an outcry for help on we don't want this traffic congestion anymore in the Cross Bronx.
And you know what we've been doing, especially Mr. Rivera, who deserves most of the credit for initiating this project, and he's done a great job, is we are going to, at the very grassroots level, we started doing presentations at every single community board in the Bronx. So that's where we started. We're going to start hitting churches. We're going to start hitting every possible venue that will allow us to give them the information, the statistics, and the goal. Because I think once that spreads out, the community will be so behind us that the local officials, the state officials will have to get behind us and assist us in getting this resolved.
The notion of expenditure, I think, probably scares a lot of people because we all have needs in our communities and the groups that we're participating in. And, of course, anybody who says, oh, yeah, that'll cost you billions of dollars, you're never going to come up with the money. One of the things in that 2004 study was a no-build alternative. And they talked about some of the things that we talked about. They talked about free flow toll plaza technology at the Hudson River crossing to kind of use that kind of engineering that certainly would be low cost and, as they say, no build. Do you see that as maybe the first step, or are those kinds of things going to have to be part of the whole package before you proceed?
Any idea is to recoup the money on a project like this. A tunnel in Seattle will cost an estimated $1 billion a mile. You're looking at 11-mile stretch here off the top is $11 billion. The Big Dig project in Boston, millions of dollars. 1972, there was earmark money through Congress. Ronald Reagan knocked it down, but the Democrats had control of Congress, vetoed that, and put the money through. I had a meeting with Congressman Crowley's office. There's not going to be no earmarks for a year and a half, 2 years. So we're not going to see that, but we need a ready-to-go project. So when the money does come down the line, when Obama became president, he had funding for a infrastructure. All the governors came together. They only funded ready-to-go projects. So if tomorrow we had a surplus of money for infrastructure, we couldn't do nothing to Cross Bronx Express. So there's no ready-to-go projects.
Because there was no plan. There might have been a couple of dollars you could have grabbed as part of that, that money, but you weren't going to be.
Well, that's how the Tappan Zee Bridge was funded.
Before we run out of time, Mr. Sepulveda, you've been around the Bronx a long time. You've been involved in it a little bit. You've been involved in a number of different actions. Where do you see this? To me, this sounds like it resonates as strong as anything, because I can barely imagine a Bronxite at any level, whether it be, a member of the general public or a public official, of saying, no, we don't want to study this. I mean, to me, this sounds like as big a process, as an important issue as ever.
Well, Gary, everywhere that I go, that I make my presentation, every single community board, every single church, every person that I speak with, they're so enthusiastic about what we're doing that they tell me, how can we help? And so, we're taking in names, we're taking in numbers, so that as the project starts evolving, we reach out to these same community people so that we can get some action. But the response has been incredible. You're right, I've been involved in this in 20 years in Bronx politics, but I've never seen complete agreement on a project like the one we're developing.
One that resonates as well.
Yes.
So what do we do next? I know you brought this. You want to show people this? What is this?
What we have here is...
He's going to do.
Mr. Rivera, who's a man of many talents, created this T-shirt. It's the first T-shirt, hot off the press, for the Cross Bronx study, which is part of the initiative, and we brought it for you, Gary.
So there we go. That's what we want. So I get the first one because we're the first TV show to present
That's correct.
this.
That's correct.
It's going to be in the Daily News, we think,
Tomorrow.
Tuesday.
Tomorrow, that's correct.
Yeah. And, we had it
on
first.
Friday, the students are doing a site visit, going to be wearing these T-shirts.
And anybody who wants to participate or contact, this is the website?
That website, we just bought the domain name. I say it in a month, the website will be done.
CrossBronxInitiative.org. Gentlemen, thank you. I'm guessing we're going to have you or others back here over the years to keep this thing going.
Oh, absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Project.
That's my editorial comment. William Rivera, Louis Sepulveda, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
If you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in our borough of the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of the show available at BronxNet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar, and by the way, you can take the link of this show and pass it on to everybody and spread the word. Next week, of course, we'll be back Monday night at 9, as always, for Bronx Talk. In our 18th year, can you believe it? He was just a little baby. Special thanks to Jane Folloro, Michael Arias, Dina, and everybody else. Good night.
Magical thing about using energy wisely is that anyone can do it. Turn off lights. Use energy-saving light bulbs. And turn off computers and game systems when not in use. Make a change and we can really fly. Grab a grown-up and go online to energy.gov/kids.